He was like, listen, I want you to play at the loft. I'm like, wait, what? Me? I'm like, well, you've never had a guest DJ ever. And he goes, yeah, but I want you to do it. And that was the beginning of me starting to DJ again.
Arthur Baker presents Looking for the Perfect Beat podcast.
This is Arthur Baker, and I'd like to welcome you to the Looking for the Perfect Beat podcast, where I get a chance to kick back, converse, and go deep with some of the important people in my life that are featured in my new memoir, again, called Looking for the Perfect Beat, which is out in May. It looks back at my career over the years in the music, film, restaurant, all the businesses that I've been into over the years. My first guest this episode is the legendary DJ and producer John Jellybean Benitez. Hey, Jellybean, how you doing, man?
How you doing, Arthur? That was good.
All right, man. I'm here. The last time we sat in front of a camera for me was for the Rockers doc, which is actually going to be screening at Doc and Roll this summer in London. So you'll actually make the big screen. Okay, first question obviously is, do you have a perfect beat, and could you describe your perfect beat?
Yeah, I'm gonna, probably state the obvious. MFSB's "Love Is the Message." The first time I heard it, I was really curious because it was the disco era, and there were very few instrumentals. The club I frequented, DJ played this, I don't know what you would call it, fanfare, fanfare, and then "Love Is the Message" began. I was totally blown away because it was an instrumental and people were dancing and had like this kind of cool groove to it. And then in the middle, it's all the beats fall out and there was a drum fill. And then from that moment on, I just thought it was really magical. And it was hard to find out what the name was because we didn't have Shazam, right?
Exactly.
Keep bugging the DJ. What was that song you played? And he was like, which one? I was like 3 songs ago. It was an instrumental. And he's like, I don't know. And he was high. And finally I said, can I look at your records? And he goes, they're right there. And I went to, is it this one? Is it this one? He goes, that one. Yeah. It's called "Love Is the Message."
Who was the DJ?
That's how I found the song.
The DJ.
Rafael Charas.
Right. Oh, from Atlantic Records. I remember Raphael. Did I mean, back then people didn't want to share the tunes, right? Was that a little later on?
I guess in the early part, people were very shared, and then all of a sudden it became a point where you had to find out, and there was no way to get to the DJ. Sometimes they were, up a ladder in a corner of a building in an area you couldn't access. I figured, I used to drive Nicky Ciano crazy. 'Cause I'd come with a little pad and a pen and pass it to him, and he told me that he knew, like when he saw me, he said, I'm going to play 5 new records in a row. This kid's going to go crazy. It was always annoying him trying to find out what it was that he was playing.
Yeah, it wasn't easy making it to the DJ booth. I mean, like we
And
could
when
talk
you weren't on a stage,
Yeah, absolutely.
no lighting, like not like it is today, but
You were hidden.
yes.
Now I have a question. Do you remember how we first met? Was it at the Funhouse, or do you have any memories of it?
I may have met you in Boston, but in passing, but I remember, countless nights with you at the Funhouse, even hanging out at the garage
Yeah.
or going to the Hamptons,
Yeah.
But I believe it was the
But I mean,
Funhouse.
the Funhouse. You believe it was the
I would say
Funhouse
the
when we
Funhouse.
first met?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not really clear, but I do know it was obviously. Was it okay? Now, was it before Planet Rock?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because
So
I
we
knew
met.
that you had done the North End
Right.
record.
Happy Days, which
Yeah.
you were
I've
you
been
were a fan
playing.
of that one. You were playing
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I would play Tease Happy and then mix into the vocal and then go back to Tease Happy. The Funhouse allowed me to, play records for 10 minutes if I wanted.
Well,
Only 'cause,
how long did you play a set? How long were you set to
I don't
do?
know,
I mean,
14 hours
yeah.
on Saturday and 10 on Friday.
Now you did have a bathroom attached to your
Yes.
booth, which was really important back then. And
Yeah.
most clubs don't really have that. But if you play at Dante's, you actually have to leave the club,
club.
right? You played there. You got to leave the club, walk down a hallway, outside. You got to get the guy to open the door for you. You got to put on "Love Is the Message," or you're in trouble, or you got to pee real quickly. And then sometimes there's people using the bathroom for other stuff, and you can't get in, so
Yeah.
it's not a good time. Now, you were talking about Happy Days. Now, is it true? I'm not sure you mentioned this to me, or it's just in my mind, that when you had Pure Energy wrote Holiday for you,
Hmm.
one thing I remember about that was when you played it for me and you said, should I give it? This is really clear in my memory, right? You said, should I let Madonna record it or should I record it? I'll never forget that. And I was saying, yeah, I think it's probably a good idea to let Madonna do it. That is super clear in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, some of those, through the drug haze, I remember that because I remember giving you, that's probably the only good advice I've given anyone in
No,
a
you
disco,
actually gave me really good advice, Arthur. I don't know if you remember this, but I had been remixing records and working with co-producing, and Holiday was the first song I had ever produced. And I forgot which studio. I want to
It
say it
was
was
Sigma. It was Sigma.
Sigma.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
I
there. I
came to
remember
Sigma to
walking in.
tell you, hey, I just came from this meeting from Sire, and I'm going to produce my first song by myself. And you, you looked at me, and I said, like, what words of advice can you give me? And you were like, you're going to know exactly what to do. Trust your instincts. And that
Wow.
stayed with me.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I
That
know.
was good advice. Shit, I wish I remembered that for myself. It would
And
have been
that's what you
great to
told me.
trust.
I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I could do this. I've
Yeah.
never
Well,
produced a record, but
you walked right
I
in
have
and you
five
did it.
days and $5,000.
Yeah. No, I remember because I came in with Tina B, my wife at the time. She did
Hmm.
It'll be all right.
Yeah,
And Fred was there. I was there when he played the
yeah,
piano, the great classic Fred Zarr piano solo. So yeah,
yeah.
that was some session. Who was engineering? Jay Mark? Was it Jay?
J Mark, yeah.
See, I
Yeah,
remember
I
that
started on
session
a Monday and it
clearer
was
than my
finished.
own sessions.
And
But
only because Madonna had recorded a song called Ain't No Big Deal. And
which was no
she
big
had,
deal because I've never heard of it.
and Stephen Bray, she had told Stephen Bray he was going to produce the first album. And when he found out that Reggie Lucas did the bulk of the album, he had another group record it. Epic Records put it out, and then she didn't want it on her album because then it would be a cover. So I had that piano vocal of Holiday and was like, "What about this song?" And she was so upset that her album was going to be pushed back,
But when
and
it
being the
came out,
voice at the time, I was like, "Hey, I got a song, check it out."
but when it came out, was she upset? Was she happy with the
No,
results?
no, definitely not.
Yeah, no, that was, I mean, but it's interesting because, most of the songs, her early songs were, she had some involvement with writing, not all of them, but,
Right.
that really kicked her off in the clubs. I know she had Everybody, which she wrote, and our old late friend Mark Heyman's worked on.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time I didn't meet Madonna through you, funnily enough. I was at the New Music Seminar, and Mark came up to me and said, I'm producing this girl, and she's right over there. You want to meet her and listen to the track? And she had these ratty little headphones. Remember with the metal ones? It was like the first generation. It was probably Sanyo or some shit. But the headphones were horrible. They were like a piece of metal with two little things at the end. Put it on and thought it was cool. I said, yeah, this is great. It reminds me of Patrice Rushen. And she was like, oh, thank you. I love Patrice Rushen. And then Mark called. Now, these are my memories. And he said, I'm going to produce that track. What does a producer do? Now, the thing was, I've later heard that he had done other stuff, so I don't know if he was just sort of trying to get info from me, but I said, you got to get a keyboard player, programmer, and I used two, Fred Zarr or John Roby, and I said for that song, I think it would be Fred Zarr. And that's how Fred got the gig to do that, and then he played on all the records for quite a while with you and with, I
Yeah.
think even Nile used them too. So
Yep.
yeah. But I'll never forget because what I remember the headphones being so shit. But then obviously she was time, and
Hmm.
once you guys started going out, and then some of the times in the Hamptons, driving
Hmm.
around Stone, lost in my car, trying to find her penny candy. Certain memories you never leave you. I mean, what do you remember about? Well, just to fill people in, we shared a house in the Hamptons in 1983 in the summer. Me, Jellybean, John Roby, Madonna showed up a few times. She didn't come out a lot. and Tina B. And we had a great time. It was a great time. We all had hit records and we had fun, and we used to go to the Palm and
Yeah.
have dinner and watch famous designers and club owners snort cocaine at the table. Remember that time we were sitting there and we look up and there's
Oh yeah,
Ravel's
and
dead and
didn't John
Calvin Klein.
Belushi rent the house before we did, like the summer
The
before?
summer before we had the house, John Belushi had rented it and nearly burnt it down. Remember? There were like candles on the side, and the woman said, "Do not light those candles." I said, "Well, take them down then. If they're there, someone's going to light them."
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? Because that was where she did the gig at Bay Street
Yes.
that summer.
Preston Powell's place.
Yeah. And what did you? I mean, obviously she was your girlfriend, and what did you? I mean, obviously you couldn't have imagined how big she'd become, but what did you think when you
I
first?
thought, listen, honestly, that maybe this could be a gold record. But I didn't even really know what that meant. I was a standard, and I thought, wow. Because I had been playing, back then you'd made a record, it'd come out 3 months later. So I'd been playing it at the Funhouse, and the whole crowd knew all the lyrics to the whole song before it even came out. And then I gave an acetate to Larry, he was playing it, and people were, constantly, what is that? What is that? And, Madonna had a base with everybody and physical attraction and burning up. But I
But
think just having,
what did you think of her as like an artist? Did you think the potential for her to be doing this shit for 40 years? I mean, there's no way you could, obviously,
there's no way I thought that. I just thought it was going to be a big record,
That record, you were thinking, my record's going to be a big record. It's on the radio, and you didn't really think beyond that because we didn't think beyond that.
No, no,
right?
no.
No one thought about
But
people.
at that time, we were all
Yeah.
having big records. We had no idea. I mean, like if you ask me now, that I would be DJing for 50 years and still records. Never imagined any of this. I just knew that my mom was like, you have to have a job. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be a DJ. And she was like, that's not a job. Someone's going to pay you to play records.
Did you
I'm
say
like, yeah.
did you say the same thing to Layla when she came home and said, "Dad, I want to be a DJ"?
Well, with Layla, I was her biggest critic. She used to like tell her friends, I'm a DJ. And I would interject and say, she's not a DJ. She hasn't been paid to DJ yet. When she gets paid to be a DJ, then she'll be a DJ. But, I made it really challenging and hard for her. And, because I really wanted her to,
Something
actually, I thought
else?
she was going to be a film director is what I really thought she was going to do.
Yeah, that's what
And
I think my daughter's going to do. And she won't, no, I don't think she has the patience to be a DJ. I mean, DJ, you need, seriously, people don't think about it, but you need so much patience and focus to be a DJ because you have to remember all these tracks.
yeah.
Remember what goes after. That's why I was a horrible DJ because I had no focus. And now doing it, I'm better because I don't do any drugs and I have more focus and more of a history and more patience. But to be a DJ, it's hard work. And back in the day, it was really hard work with vinyl. I mean, carrying those records around and just sort of staying on top of what was out there. You had to do research. I mean, and when you're playing now, I know you play Defected a lot. What are you playing now? Do you play old, new, mix?
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't want to play old records, but then sometimes I hear something new and I hear like, well, this is an extension of this, and I'll play it, and then people are like, what is that? And I was like, well, that was a big dance record like in 1976 or in 1983 or whatever, and then some people know stuff, but it's just natural for me to just go through the 50 years of music that I've been listening to it and playing it, that to go from one to another. But it depends. If I'm doing Glitterbox, that's more sort of new disco house.
How do you stay on top of that, though? Do you have someone sort of looking for records and shit for
No,
you?
no, no. Well, luckily, I have a lot of colleagues that make a lot of hit records. So a lot of times I'll get them as works in progress or a rough mix, and along the way, and when they finish.
Very much like the old days when I
Yeah.
used to bring you stuff. Yeah, exactly
So
the same.
I always, found that. And I listen to lots of DJs on, Twitch or YouTube, and just, randomly, someone told me about a DJ this morning called I Hate Models. And so you got to see, this guy plays songs at 160 beats a minute. That would be way too fast for anything that I'd ever play. But, I'm going to go find them and then listen to it.
Yeah. So
And
you're
then
doing
Layla,
your
also, like, she'll hear songs and she'll go, Dad, this one's for you. You wait till you hear this. And she'll
oh,
send it to me.
well, that's
Because, I
great.
lean very soulful house, Afro house, and obviously disco and all the offshoots of modern, what they now call disco,
You have to do research because you're actually playing in
constantly.
current for kids. You're playing for
Yeah.
kids, and you got to be on top of it because if you're not, they're not gonna boo like the old days.
Yeah, like if I'm playing
No, but
space, that's a
I
whole
remember when
different.
we, yeah, that's hard.
And if I go to high for Glitterbox, it's a whole different thing. So it
Yeah.
changes. And Layla plays like, I don't know,
I mean,
this thing.
what's your most fun place to play now? What's your favorite venue or place to play? You must have one that you
Yeah,
really
it's
like
it's
more
it's
than the others.
more about a party. Well, I love
Right.
playing New York only because
Because you got all
they
your people
listen.
there.
They
You got
listen to music.
your
They're
fans.
open to hearing new songs. And I believe that, having played for as long as I have, people sort of trust what I'm playing if it's a new record, along with, everything else. There's probably, 10 records that an audience wants to hear on any given weekend and any given time, right? Those are like the 10 biggest records. And then for me to make the party happen, I have to figure out what else I can play, whether it's new, unreleased, or classic that can go to play the night. And I'm used to playing start to finish. So, going
Now it's easy.
somewhere.
Now it's easy for you. I mean, come on. What's the longest set you have other than when you're doing your own party? I'm sure you play in New
Yeah,
York. How
New
long
York
do you
is
play?
like 8 hours, 9 hours, but it goes by in a blink.
Not
And,
for me.
and
8 hours, man. Do you remember what I mean?
well,
Do
that's
you
in
play
New
the
York. I'm
same? Do
playing
you
for
ever
dancers.
play the
People
same
that are
thing?
dancing, they're not there to like.
Yeah, but do
But
you ever play a track like say you play it at 2 o'clock and then by 5 o'clock you've maybe forgotten you played it and play it again? Has that ever happened?
no, but there were certain records that I played
You
multiple
might not
times if I
know.
loved it. And
Yeah, but
my
now
short-term memory
do you do that
isn't that
now or
bad
is
yet.
that was
Yeah,
that
if I
back in
love
the
a
day or
record,
now?
yeah, if I'm playing start to finish and I'm creating the vibe that starts the night and then bringing them to those moments that where the crowd is peaking and then taking them for the rest of the journey till I end. If it's a record that I love, I'll play it more than once. But not
Right.
because I forgot, just only
No.
because I love that record and it's getting the reaction that I expected it to get.
Are there any of those records out now? Can you tip us on any of the new ones? No?
The last one was Superman by Black Coffee, right?
Yeah.
That I
I
would
mean, do
play.
you go out and listen to other DJ? I mean, I guess you do when
Yeah,
you're out
a lot.
touring. You
Especially, when I'm in Ibiza, it gives me that. And I end up going to hear things of DJs playing records that I wouldn't play one of their records that they
right.
played. But just to see, and then I look and there's like 4,000, 5,000 people
People
going
going
crazy.
nuts. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I guess it's a good record, huh?
Well,
It's not something I would play or buy.
yeah, but it's a good record for their crowd. They
Yes.
know their crowd and they've trained their crowd to like that record.
Hmm.
Now, how's Layla as a DJ? What's she playing? And when you play back to back, how's that? That must be interesting.
It's really good because she uses record box and I use no technology. I just have my songs in there. So what she'll do is like send me the things you think you might play so I could put them in record box so I could see where it's at in the record. And but
Right.
technically she's really good because I was on her. I was like, if you're going to be a DJ, these are the things you need to know. But more importantly for her is the programming. She would come to a lot of my gigs and I would explain to her in real time what was happening in the room and which dancers on the dance floor I was paying attention to and what I wasn't paying attention to. And, I'm going to lean this way. And, she's a really good chess player. So I was able to explain it to her in chess moves of how you're planning. You're here and you could either do this and win in 5 moves or go this way and win in 3 moves. So in the same thing of like, the audience looks like they're a little tired right now. It's getting really hot in the room. They're all sweating. So I may bring it back. But if not, I'm going to hit them with this one and they're going to go crazy. And that, for me is, important just to explain that to her so that she could really understand programming. She has really great taste in music because there's even some melodic techno that I listen to now that that she's played and I've seen the reactions on the crowd. And, understand it because it's kind of like disco in a way because it's so melodic. But yeah, it's, for me, for her, it was programming and then being technically good and then being creative, not just playing a song from the beginning and when it gets to the end, mix out of it, figure out a way to sort of play those records in a way that you can create a lot of excitement with them.
Yeah, people, that's sort of a lost art, I think. I mean, I guess the best DJs do that. And obviously now with technology, it's way easier to do it because you have control of each bit of the song, and you could rearrange it on the just on your whim. You could do it. So do you mess around with them now? Do you sort
Yeah,
of do it? It's basically doing a
allow me
remix,
to do that.
doing a live remix, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, because I used to play a 45 in part one and then mix it into part two. And sometimes I would start with part two and then go into the vocal and then go back to the instrumental and play with it, because, I had a very discerning crowd at the Funhouse. And, there were records that I had to play every week. And so I tried different ways to introduce it and get a reaction from the audience.
Speaking of the Funhouse, the Funhouse was famously captured in the Confusion video. Without that video, there would be no good footage of that club and pretty much of any other clubs. I mean, the fact that in the 80s, no one had a video camera and you couldn't really show up in a club and just take video. So I think, that video is so important to capture, literally be back in the Funhouse when you watch that video. Do you remember the night? Because me and you are sort of the stars of the video, more than the band.
Yes, I do. You were like director. Okay, you go over there. Now we're gonna come in with the tape, and then you just
Yeah.
put it on like you normally would play a record. Because I played a lot of works in progress off of reel to
Well, I
reel.
used to bring you. I remember the one that is really most clear in my mind is when I brought "Play at Your Own Risk," the instrumental,
Yeah,
because you had been playing Planet Rock, and I
right.
said we got this instrumental, and you put it on, and people went insane. And then I got Tom Silverman to come down the next week and see what the crowd reaction was, because it was like a new version of Planet Rock. To me, I like it better, but and it just sort of, when you played it on and the piano came on, people went fucking nuts, right? I mean, do you remember that?
Yes, but that night was like sort of like we're gonna shoot the video live while the club's open. Just do what you do.
How did, I mean, I don't remember much. I mean, I was sort of more into the pressure of having to ride around in a taxi cab and sort of try to act and all that. But were they using lights? They must have been.
Yeah, they had a guy holding a light, and I guess they must have had. There were a few people, like two or three people in the crew, and New Order, you, me. I mean, my lighting guys. It was crazy.
But I mean, as I said, it really captured a time that, I mean, there are lots of photos, snapshots, but, doing research when you do a doc, you're looking for footage of clubs, and literally there's not much. And
That's not much.
that
What about the outtakes from that night?
it's like the outtakes for Beat Street. No one seems to know if there were any. I mean,
Oh, wow.
with Beat Street, there should have been tons, and MGM is sort of not interested, or they just haven't found them. And nowadays, the director would have had digital copies, and you'd have all the backup. But
Yeah.
no, it's still. Recently, they did the Warner Brothers did a remastering and an AI version of Confusion, just making it look better, and it looks amazing. Because I don't know if you've seen that version, but
I have not seen that yet.
it's so bright, and especially even the stuff on the street, driving through Times Square and all that. There isn't much of that. It looks like a Scorsese movie or something. There's
Right.
not that much. There's not that much footage around of that. But
You came from the studio to the Funhouse. We shot the stuff there, and then you went to the garage to shoot. Right?
then we went to the garage. But I don't think I went to the garage. The band went to the garage. I probably stayed at the Funhouse. I don't remember being. No, I don't remember. I'm not in the shot in the garage, and I'm not really sure if I went. I just remember at the end of the night driving out to the Hamptons, totally fucked up, and me and Tina were fighting out front, and Hooky still remembers that. He was like, Tina was trying to get the car out of a parking spot, and she hit the car in front, hit the car behind. She still can't parallel park to this day. But it was horrible. I mean, those nights we would go to the Funhouse, stay till the end, and then drive out to the Hamptons. I mean, 2.5, 3 hour drive into the sunrise. It's a lot of fun, man. They were a lot of great times. You know, I was going to ask you a favorite production that you've done.
I could narrow it to one, but I really loved
A couple.
a couple of them. So
How
one
about
was
one? Here's the thing. How about one favorite one and one that was slept on that you thought was great and it didn't do anything? There must have been one of those too that you think is great.
I don't know, maybe Nunk by Warp 9.
What, for one that no one the people slept on? Nah, it was a great record. And any record you could finish with Lottie Golden, that's a plus right there. She wasn't easy, but she was super talented. But how about one that what's your favorite, regardless of what it did?
Okay, so I love this dub mix I did on Yamo Be There because it didn't have any drums in it. So to mix that song in just with feel and just to watch the audience's reaction to it, I love. And I just love the way I worked on that with John Patoka.
A great engineer, Tokes.
And then my other favorite would be If You Love Someone, Set Them Free by Sting.
Right, great one.
I did that out at A&M Studios with Michael Hutchinson
You
as the
had
engineer.
you had a good taste in engineers because both of those
Yeah,
guys were great engineers, and you work with J Mark too, right?
and J Mark,
So you were a Sigma guy. You
Yeah.
got in at Sigma.
I grew up loving Philadelphia International Records, and those guys worked on it. Well, except for Patoker, he came later,
He came later.
but they were Sigma guys, and George Tarsier,
Yeah,
Joe Tarsier,
Joe.
really trained, and was really picky about who worked as an engineer at his studio. So, and I just, they were great at. I learned so much from all of them, and they were really great at separating, creating a groove and still having a song because of
Right,
all the.
because back then we were meant to keep the song. A few years after that, it was like dump the song,
Right.
sample one bit, and make a new track. But when we were doing these remixes, they wanted you to know what the song was. They wanted you to make the song better.
Right. It was a matter of making it club friendly and keeping the integrity of the song melodically and lyrically, and you could do whatever you want, just don't change anything.
When was the first time do you remember when you first added something to a remix, like overdubs that the band sort of went, no,
No.
no, no.
So I had been wanting to, add percussion and started using Sherry Johnson on a lot of records.
Yeah,
But
the
then I
great
was asked
Sherry.
to do, yeah, I was asked to do Say, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, and wanted to do an overdubs. And George Martin was like, okay, but we want to know what musician you're using. So I thought maybe I could get Ralph McDonald to
Yeah, he's credible. Why not go for the guy who also wrote Where Is the Love?
so
Little known fact. Great
I
songwriter too.
tracked out his number, called him, and told him, I'm working on this thing. I can't tell you what it is. And he was like, well, I just can't come to New York to, like, you got to tell me. So I had to go back and ask if I could say, and then I said, I could tell you, it's a Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney song. And he's like, okay, when? I'm coming. Because I figured it would be hard to say no
Yeah.
to him. He's a credible jazz musician. He played percussion. He had a song on Saturday Night Fever. So it was like checked a lot of
Yeah.
boxes,
Yeah.
right? And they heard it and liked it. The only other thing is I had to fly to London to meet with them before I did anything, to hear the song.
Wow.
So,
I did a Paul McCartney mix, One More Lonely Night, which was really shit. I cashed the check, but it was not. It was just a bad song, and there was no Michael Jackson on it. It was just sort of. Do you have one? Do you have one you could admit? First of all, did they like what you came up with?
yeah, they liked that they did an edit of it for the single as well. And then he asked me I did another song for McCartney called Ode to a Koala Bear. And then they had me do This Is the Man with Michael and Paul again. And so it started, I got to come to London and go to Abbey Road and,
No, that's amazing. No, I
meet
got, I got,
George Martin.
I
Like,
got none of that.
that was cool for me. I was
Yeah, no, I would
super
have.
excited.
I did meet George Martin once. We did when I opened up my the Elbow Room in Chapel Market. We did a thing for the Royal Institute of the Blind, which he was like one of the head guys for that. He was a patron of. And Bob, I had like Damian Hirst, Joe Strummer, Manny from the Happy Mondays, all these Bez, they were all there. It was a great party.
Wow.
And Bobby Gillespie of Primal Scream was DJing. And George Martin walks to the booth. It's really loud. He's just killing it. The system is not great. It was our first night, opening night, and he's playing some rock, punk rock. And George Martin goes up to him and says, "Excuse me, sir, could you turn the music down a little bit, just a little bit?" And Bobby Gillespie goes to him, "Fuck off, old man, fuck off." He tells George Martin to fuck off. I mean, I was like, man. And a few years, maybe 5 years ago, I was talking to Bobby and I said, "Do you remember that?" He goes, "Not at all." But I remember it. I couldn't believe it. But it was, yeah, that's my George Martin story. Okay. What was your most difficult remix? There must be one that was like,
Yeah.
what am I going to do
One
with
that
this?
you actually worked on, actually.
Okay. Go ahead.
Cindy Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
It was so
Because
challenging.
here's the thing. Go ahead. Tell me why, and then I'll tell you a funny story.
Well, Madonna and I were living together at that point. I was dealing with that. You're working with
Yeah.
who? Blah, 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 right? And I went, and she came. She wanted to come. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, well,
she had to be, yeah.
Pep Editor came, Dave Bowie came, I was like, okay, cool. She can come. And she's sitting there, and every time I was playing or adding percussion, she would have something to say, and then we would play it back. Obviously, playing the last overdub would, in theory, be the loudest in the rough mix as you're playing back. And she was always concerned, well, what are you going to do with my vocal? I'm not even paying attention to you. I'm trying to create this
Why aren't
groove.
you, Jellybean?
So she came back the next day, and finally I quit. I was
Okay.
like, I can't do this. I can't do this.
Well, I'm glad you quit.
I called her manager, and then they said, well, you got to come back. You got to come back, and she's not going to come. You'll just be there by yourself, and you
Yeah.
finish and deliver. Of course, I agree, and I go back, and she comes anyway.
Yeah.
And so I finished the record, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got through this.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
since then, it was, when she was put on, I think it was the cover of Time magazine. I think it was the year she won Best New Artist. We were at the Grammys, and she came over and was just like, I was starting. I was afraid what you guys were going to do to my record and my voice, and she was very sweet. And
Yeah.
she's been great.
Well,
Cover version of Disco Inferno with her decades ago.
really? Wow. So you did what you did, and then they called me to try one, and I don't think she showed up. I think by then they were like, she can't show up. And I did, my version of it. I mean, the thing with why it's so important for me, and I do write about it in the book, was Springsteen had heard it, or Joe McEwen, or someone played it for Springsteen, and that's how I got the opportunity to do the Springsteen thing.
That's great.
That is that's how I got Springsteen, and then through the Springsteen, I got to work with Dylan. So because of that, so it was important for me, and I literally never realized that. But I'll tell you a funny story. I think it was Dick Wingate or someone from Epic said, the rumor over here was Jellybean didn't want it to be good because he didn't want her to compete with Madonna. That was what I'm saying, you know what? I doubt it's true. I could see him doing that,
Never crossed my mind.
Never. When Madonna said, "Who you working with?" You should have brought Madonna to the studio with you. That would have been
good.
That would have been good. All right, let's see. So you did that, and then when you shifted, when did you actually stop DJing and just sort of focus on production and remixing? Because there was a time after the Funhouse. Did you ever have another residency after the Funhouse, really?
No, not until I started the Feel the Spirit party. I was, at that point, I was doing like 3-4 records a week, and I was booked for months in advance and passing on so many records. I mean, it was just, you need it when? In 3 weeks? That's not possible. It's not going to happen. And I wanted to be in on every session. I could have had, 3-4 rooms going and doing 3 mixes a day. I wanted to really work on this stuff. So it was sometime in early 84. And then I went to LA for a while, which was a lot of fun, and started working a lot of songs for movies and television.
You were doing films out there, yeah.
And so that was, I never thought from being a DJ that I'd remix records and then produce records and then write what I thought were songs for movies. And then be a music supervisor and, like all the different things that came with that. And
But
the
you
funny thing,
you
even when wasn't a DJ, I was still going to Vinyl Mania in New York. And they're saying like, what's the new stuff? And I'd listen and I'd get two copies of everything that I never opened,
wow.
and I just had all these doubles only because I was used to, going back and forth between songs. I guess, part of that is probably from growing up in the Bronx and watching Cool Herc and Grandmaster Flowers and these
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, they all had two copies
And
to
they would cut back
recreate.
and forth. And I thought that was pretty cool. When I go to clubs, the DJ would play a song till the end and then play the
Yeah.
next song. And that worked. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just sort of, part of me was a wannabe b-boy from the Bronx and also wanted to play in gay clubs and straight clubs and different, black clubs and just across the board.
Well, you had that musical education growing up in the Bronx, and literally, it's great to be able to go from genre to genre because obviously back in that day you were playing, you'd play James Brown and you'd go disco, funk, I mean, talk about actually. Why don't we talk a bit about like b-boys and hip hop and because hip hop was from the Bronx for sure. And when you were a kid, when it was all kicking off, right? I mean,
Hmm.
like you said,
Yeah, I was
DJ
I don't
Flowers
know,
and
like
Herc.
13, 14, 15. And that's when I was really first exposed to music, mostly because, well, there's this Italian guy named Vinny, and he got bouncers for nightclubs. And so the older brothers of my friends were bouncers at nightclubs. That's how I first sort of experienced the whole club scene. And I was, I don't know, 16, and I looked like I was 12 or 13. And
And you
they
still
brought me
got
to
into
see a
the
DJ
clubs
play, and I
because
was like, oh my
you
God,
knew
look at
the
this.
you knew the bouncers, so you could get into the club.
But, going to like parks or block parties where these
Yeah,
guys were
talk
getting.
about park jams and block parties. People
Yeah.
people don't know enough about that.
So these were parties that were set up outside, mostly in the summer, and a DJ would bring his equipment with his friends, set it up, and get the electricity from a lamppost. I don't know what they call them in the UK, but
They
and
call
that's where
them
they. Okay, good.
telephone poles, up the telephone pole and the lamp.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where they go. And then you'd have another DJ on the other side of the park also set up. And they would have like these DJ battles, but they weren't called battles. It's like who could play the better records and get the crowd over to where they were to breakdance, right? But it wasn't called breakdancing. It was just
It was called
dance.
b-boying.
Yeah.
B-boying, right? B-boying.
Like all these words came later, and I was like, what?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
that's what it was.
That's what you're calling it. And at the same time, I was going to these clubs in Manhattan, seeing people dance that I didn't know any of, their lifestyle, nothing. I was just like, wow. So I was bringing a little of the stuff that I learned in the Bronx, like quick cuts and extending breaks and stuff into playing 45s as a professional discotheque disc jockey. That's what my business card said.
And you got a gig, and then that's how you were able to tell Layla you were not a DJ until you get a business card. I had the production business cards. I never had a DJ business card. I was at like all my different production company names, Prince Arthur Productions, because I lived on Prince Street in Prince Arthur.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so that was an important time, and that whole thing of people don't realize that hip hop came really from disco. You want to talk about that because the music, all the rap
Those are
records.
songs, there were a lot of break beats that were being played in clubs, but they weren't being extended and no one was talking or creating poetry above the beats. They would, a DJ would just play the songs. And there were a lot of jazz artists that had club records, as well as rock. I mean, it was a little bit of everything. There was no disco section. There were no 12 inches. It was, you really had to go to a record store and listen to records to figure out how I'm going to get 3 or 4 or 5 new records I could play this weekend.
Did you ever go to did you go to Downstairs Records? Because
Yes.
Elroy,
Benji.
Benji and Elroy,
Yeah.
you'd go to talk
Yeah, and
about
I
that because
I got
that's an
to see
interesting thing.
Ronald Coles at Colony Records, and he would play me imports all the time. Like, listen to this. It's like this African thing, and it was Black Blood, and just a lot of I'd go in there and guys were DJs. I wanted to be a DJ, and I played like Sweet 16s and school dances, and these guys were playing in clubs, and I only knew about them because there was this
Discotheque magazine? No. Did you get?
discotheque, and well, that was after, but there was another. Bill Casey, Bob Casey had this, like, not a record pool, but this association of DJs, and they would print like their top 10 playlists, and then I would go like, I'm going to hear all of these songs, and you only found them in records. And Michael Gomes had Mixmaster, and that's how I found out about music, because all the DJs worked residencies playing 5-6 nights a week,
Right.
right? So they couldn't even go hear
Unbelievable.
it.
People,
It's the only
they
way
play
they
every
could
night.
hear it. Yeah, they would have to see what other DJs were playing and then try to find those records.
But
Yeah, and I was going
down,
around listening to
downstairs
every.
records. Can you talk? Do you remember going into because it was in downstairs at the in the subway?
It was in the in the
Yeah,
subway.
it was in the subway, and you'd go in there, and that's the first time I saw like breaks, because they used to have a wall with sort of breaks at 45s, and they all had like the break section, and sort of that's where Bambaataa used to go and get his record supposedly, and
Yeah. No, it was great. You could take the train there and stay in the subway and
never see the light of day.
go into this tiny little hole in the wall, and they had so many records I wanted to buy. That was the first time I saw a commercial 12-inch too, of 10%
Yeah.
of the Waltz.
Oh, I write about that in the book, about going to Galaxy 21 with David Todd and sitting there having a drink after work, and Walter was there, and he put on the record, and the two of us were sort of looking at each other, and we figured that he had two copies and he was going back and forth. And then we went to the booth, and he just had this 12-inch, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's my new mix." And we were pretty blown. It was one of those moments for me. But do you remember when you first heard that record? Did it resonate
10%.
with you?
I heard it before he even mixed it, and he was playing 245s back to back.
So he was okay.
I mean,
so he did.
listen. Walter Gibbons played like a b-boy because he would cut records.
Yeah.
Right. But he wasn't scratching; he was just cutting
No,
records,
just extending with two copies.
extending breaks. Right. Um, uh, I thought I was the greatest DJ in the world till I went to Galaxy 21, heard Walter Gibbons play. Never seen anything like it. The way, his idea of turning off the sound, the bass, he would turn off the amplifiers. And then somehow flipped them
put
all
them
back
back
in, and the bass came in, and I was just like, how's he doing that? Like, how do you do it? And he would play these records, and people would go crazy and were screaming his name. And, Kenny Carpenter was the lighting man at that time at Kenny, and that's how I met Tony.
Francois.
And Francois was playing drums. I remember going and says, "This guy's playing drums," and Walter kept changing the groove. He was so frustrated with the choice. He hated it. And he had these, Bose monitors. I mean, like, he was amazing. Live.
It was.
I didn't, and then he was working on the 10% record. Then he did Hit and Run, and then there was so many things that he played that I would go out of my way to find, pay top dollar for, then go back to the Bronx and put it on in the peak of the night like he did, and my dance floor would just stop. And I was like, how's that possible? They were just going crazy to this.
And was it the same version? He just played it
Yeah,
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Artists, like, can't even pronounce them. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get this record. That's the first time I heard Yellow Train, New York City, just classic Walter Gibbons records. Had no idea they would clear my dance floor. They did every time.
And then he found God. And then he found God, and he decided bass was the instrument of the devil, right? Remember that? That he stopped using bass on his records. I don't know if you remember that. He would do.
Yes, I do.
I mean, the Set It Off mix. He did Set It Off.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't get to go to Seattle, but he played at the Catacombs in Philadelphia. I went there to hear him playing. That was crazy.
Yeah, he was really ahead of his time, and that whole merging of hip hop, b-boying, and disco. Luongo did that. That was the first person I saw do it in Boston, where he had the 245s and he'd extend, and that's where I got my first taste of that. John was sort of a mentor to me, because he had his magazine, he had the club, and he then he started mixing records. Who did you have someone who sort of really influenced you when you first started DJing? Was there someone specific?
I would have to say it was a combination of DJs, which would have been David Mancuso, Nicky Siano, Tony Smith. Those are the, if they were playing and I wasn't, or they were playing later than me, I would rush to go to hear what they were playing. And I remember Tony Smith played at a place called Barefoot Boys, small gay club, and I would go there and
I actually went. I actually went there once.
Yeah, stand against the wall the whole time thinking, this guy's amazing. He had great taste in music. And then, he was at Galaxy 21 and he said, I play at this club. And I said, yeah, I read it in Vince Aletti's magazine. I see your playlist and every song on your list is something I would play. And he was like, oh, come. And then we were both Knicks fans, so that was even better.
Yeah. Are you getting excited? Are you going to go to New York for any of the games?
Yes, of course. I'm going to fly up and go. Are you kidding?
When
here in Miami, clapping every time the Heat lose.
Detroit could be tough. It could be tough.
That's going to be. I think that's the best matchup.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of going to Orlando to see because they're playing. The Celtics are playing at Orlando. I was thinking of going for a game.
If you go, let me know. I'll go with you.
Oh, you want to go? Let's do it. I definitely want to go. Let's do it. All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you one thing. Okay, we didn't really talk about you getting into production. We were talking about your remixes, but when you did that first solo album and you did The Mexican and The Real Thing, and you became like a pop star in the UK, do you have any memory? What are your pop star memories of the UK?
Oh my gosh,
How about the first time? What was the first time you made it over to the UK? What was that?
Well, the first time I went was to work with B Movie. I almost got hit by a car because
You looked the wrong way. Yeah, that could have been bad. DJ killed in a traffic accident. He looked the wrong way.
I went there and had seen Abbey Road and was like, I want to work at Abbey Road. So I was working with this band called B Movie, and it went.
Yeah, that was actually, what was the one track you did?
I want to see where the Beatles crossed the street. Can you take me to see that? And they said, sure. So we go outside. I start crossing the street, and a car comes to a screeching halt. I hear it, but I don't see it. And then I turn to my left, and it was like, yeah, they drive on the wrong side. And the guy sticks his head out the window and says, get out of the way. I almost killed you. And I was like, what? And then he realized I wasn't British. And he's, you're the bloody wanker. And I turned to B Movie and go, what's a wanker? And those guys fell on the floor laughing. They could not stop laughing. But the guy was so pissed off, he just pulled on. And I was like, but what is it? What's a wanker? I can't respond. I don't know what I'm responding to. So that, almost getting killed the first time.
You wouldn't call anyone a wanker in the Bronx, You might get shot. But what was it?
But when I did Top of the Pop countless times there, And
Can you repeat that? You broke up. You broke up. Could you repeat? I did Top of the Pop.
I did Top of the Pops for every single that I had there, because at one point I think I had 3 in the top 20, or But honestly, you had turned me on to like NME and Melody Maker, and I would go buy this stuff on, I think it was Saturday mornings, just see what was going on in music from there, because I was playing a lot of stuff from the UK. And, I didn't know what Top of the Pop, like, we got to sit in the studio and make believe we're re-recording the whole song that took me 3 weeks to make in an afternoon. And the guy was like, yeah, well, mostly bands come in here and do one take, and that's it. I was like, oh, okay. And they would, you had to re-record it before you went on TV.
Back then,
I don't know what they do.
I think a few people just sort of mouthed it, and at one point it stopped being that. But that must have been some crazy. What were you doing when you were performing these songs?
I don't know, playing tambourine,
were you
little
playing
keyboard
keys?
part that I memorized. Yeah, just like teach me that part. That's the only part I need to. That's it.
And who were the singers you were working with on those tracks? Do you remember who sang on?
It was Stephen Dante.
Yeah.
Lisa Fiorello.
Right.
And we toured all over Europe. I was having a good time.
You were ahead of the time there, because that.
And people were like, "Are you going to DJ?" I'm like, "No."
Well, you were. That was DJ as pop star. That really was pre all the Chicago guys who were making records and going to England also. So there was, before that, DJs didn't travel. They were afraid of losing their residencies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that true?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you wouldn't, Larry wouldn't go anywhere because he figured if he left, David DePino would take his gig. But so then, at what point did you decide you sort of lose the fire for making records? Because I know
Yeah,
you described. I mean, you could. Why don't you talk about how you sort of transitioned out of music and then pretty much doing business stuff, and how you got back into wanting to do music?
yeah. I did a lot of film and television stuff, and just found that to be a lot of fun. And then I had Steve Rebell and Ian Schrager open the Palladium, and I was living in LA, and they called me because they wanted me to play opening night for the Palladium. And I hadn't DJed in like a year. And I was like, I'm just going to call Larry. Larry, what do I need? What records do I need? And he said, I have all these records. I have duplicates of all of these songs that I'm playing right now. Any of these you put on the dance floor is going to be fine. But you may want to listen to them ahead of time.
Yeah, don't trust the DJ.
And then I went to Vinyl Mania and bought a bunch of stuff. I spoke to Tony Smith. I spoke to David Mancuso. I was like, oh, these are my biggest records. And I put those records together to play. And I hadn't played. And I was playing opening night. Larry was playing the next night. He came. And he came into the booth dripping in sweat. And he goes, this is like amazing. What you're doing is amazing. You're giving me some ideas that I'm going to try out. And he goes, you haven't heard any of these records. And you put this together. And the place is, look at that. Look at that crowd. They're going crazy. So, I mean, that was good to know that sort of never left.
But when was that, though? That's like 20
That had to be like 85, I guess, 86.
Yeah. So you're saying you hadn't played for a year,
no,
and
wait.
then you, yeah.
Yeah, so like 86, 87, right? It was like early house records, early, I remember playing the Elims and place went nuts, and I was like, oh, that's a good record. Because, I've listened to them enough to go like, okay, this is where I'm going to mix in, this is where I'll mix out of. A few of them I got to listen to a few times, but it wasn't until I was playing them live that I was like, oh, yeah, this has a lot of energy like that other song. Wait, what is that other song? And then I'd find that and just figure out a way to make it work. And then I was playing there. Yeah, I don't know. I just sort of needed a break from everything that was happening in my life at the time. And honestly, I wanted to not play records as much as I loved it. And then I wanted to stop making records. And eventually, I would still DJ, if someone was having a party and multiple DJs, or it was a fundraiser for a DJ, I would play.
Well, I remember when me, you, and Will Sokoloff. Remember we were going to do the thing at the coffee shop, and then you ended up doing that. When was that? What years?
That was about 1999, 2000. But I got married and had kids in 91. Yeah, 91. I had kids in 92, 93. I wanted to be a dad, right? So that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And
but
then
you did that. You did those parties. So that was sort of the last.
Yeah,
thing
that was the Feel the Spirit party, because there was like a Billboard conference, and it was on the Circle Line that went around Manhattan Island. David Guetta was DJing. And I just went because all my industry friends were going, DJs. Yeah. And then I wanted to go below deck, and they have a room that could hold, 1,500 people. And there was a DJ and one person standing in the middle of the dance floor. And that person was David Mancuso.
Right.
They started talking and all that. And he said, hey, I'm looking for, I asked him, when's the next loft party? And he said, well, I'm looking for a place. And I said, well, I have a place in Union Square. And so I brought David to see this place, and he sat in the middle of the dance floor.
Sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out. You said, I brought David to see that place, because that cut out.
I have a space. It's 5,000 square feet, has a wooden dance floor. Why don't you come look at it? And so he came, we made an appointment. He showed up in the afternoon, and he walked around and says, yeah, I like the vibe, and I just want to spend some time in the room. And I was like, you want me to turn on the system? He goes, no, I just want to sit here. I just need a glass of water. I got him a glass of water. He put it down in the middle floor, sat down. He said, just turn the lights off. I did. And then after about 10 minutes, I'm like, David, you want me to put the lights on? He goes, no, you mind if I stay here for a couple of hours? I was like, okay, sure. And I left. I went upstairs to eat.
Had dinner. You came back.
He was still sitting there. And then after about 3 hours, he got up. He goes, yeah, I want to do a party here. I was like, okay. And so what happened was he did a couple of loft parties, and then he said, I want you to play at a loft party. And I was like, well, I don't DJ on a regular basis. And he was like, well, why not? And I said, well, my life's different now. And he goes, yeah, but that's why. When was the last time you listened to Love is the Message, is what he said to me.
There we go.
And he said, and I said, wow, years. He said, go listen to that record. So I, next day, pull it out, put it on. I was like, yeah, what a beautiful song. And then he showed up at my office with, 10, 15 records. And he said, hey, these are for you. And then he came every day and he would say, did you listen to that song? Well, let's put it on. And then, he was like, listen, I want you to play at the Loft. I'm like, wait, what? Me? I'm like, well, you've never had a guest DJ ever. And he goes, yeah, but I want you to do it. And that was the beginning of me starting to DJ again. I did that party. I actually went to the Winter Music Conference, was going around everywhere the week before, trying to listen to records, find out that works, so that's holding the dance floor, just sort of DJ homework. And then I did that party. And then after that, I started getting phone calls from like Italy, Japan, England to come play. So I did. And at first it was like 1 gig a month and 2 gigs a month, so it became 10. And then it evolved. And I did some parties with Louie Vega in New York. And, the phone started ringing. My daughters were already like teenagers. I was like, I guess I could do this. And I started DJing it. Now, the making of the record, I still make records. I just never released any of them. I just like play them and no one else has them.
Sounds familiar.
And I play them, and then people are like, what is that? What is that? What is it? And I tell them, and they're like, oh, can I get a copy? It's not out yet. I can't.
I call it secret weapons. I play those
Yeah.
on my radio show. It's just,
I still do records. I still create my own remixes. I just play them.
But there's no reason to put. You got to
Yeah.
do your compilation, though. I know a few years ago I tried
You
to
tried.
get you to do my Dance Master series, but you should, because it's good to have them all in one place and have them on vinyl and all that, Actually, you know what? One other thing, we didn't really discuss any of the records we worked on together, but I wanted to talk about IOU because it's a record that you had a lot to do with the mix, but the most important thing you did was, you know what I'm going to say with that one? No? The solo, because we had just got an emulator, and they had an emulator at Unique, and you could sample vocals on it. And you said, because the song was A-E-I-O-U, you said, could we sample A-E-I-O-U and play a solo? That was your idea. And then Roby did it, and it was fucking genius. And yeah, that's one of those memories, studio memories. That one I really remember because you were like,
And
go ahead.
I just said it. I didn't know like how you could do it. And Roby says, "Oh yeah. Play this from here." And then
But
he was putting
whose
it in
voice
the.
was it? Do you
Huh?
know whose voice it was? Who did the A-E-I-O-U?
I have no idea.
I
I
have
think
no
it was
idea
from
either.
the multi-track, so I don't know which
Right.
voice.
Oh, it could have been sampled. You're right. It could have been sampled off
It
of
was
that.
sampled into the emulator, and he started playing it, and I lost my mind because
Yeah.
all I kept thinking is that when I play this record at the Funhouse, they're gonna go crazy. Crazy, And you created that break where it just stops and it goes, all right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. The lights could go completely dark, and I'm still thinking as a DJ, not making. I mean, it was
Well, no,
making
you were no. That's why.
participating in a record that you could play and be an anthem at the Funhouse. That was it.
But that's
That
why
was
it was great.
incredible underground record.
That's why it was great to have you working on the mixes with us because literally you knew what was going to work in the club and over the years I worked with T Scott on a few and Shep Pettibone on a few remixes, but the talent of a great DJ to actually have like I said to you, go by your instincts, the instincts of a DJ, knowing what's going to work in a club. To me, that was the most important thing. Getting the right sound, you have an engineer, but the arrangement instincts are super important. And that's what you had with, helping on Confusion and Walking on Sunshine, all those records. But you mentioned Louie quickly, but Louie is someone you sort of mentored, and he's had an insane career. I think he's probably my favorite DJ. The fact that he can play any genre and just kill it. And he'll play records I would never even think of playing, and he makes them sound like the best record ever, right? Did you, when you first met him, I know in the Rockers film, he talks about sitting in the bass bin, listening to you DJ and hearing Harder They Come. So he he clearly remembers that one. But when you
Yeah.
first met him, did he remind you of yourself, or was
He
it something,
reminded me of a
what
young
was
me,
your?
Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx. It was only about being a DJ. Like he only wanted to be a DJ. That was it. He didn't really talk about making records, although he was starting to remix records, but he really wanted to learn how to read a room, how to play for a room, how to build a peak, come out of that peak, come back into a peak. And he worked hard on it. I mean, he never gave up, and he's gifted. I saw it very early. Like I didn't know he would still be making records today. Same, I didn't know that Madonna would still be making records 50 years later, right? But I knew that he was talented and gifted and committed and had a vision and wanted to bring it to fruition, which he was able to do.
Now, did you know that his uncle was Hector Lavoe at the
At the
time?
time, no, it was many years later.
Yeah, that is crazy because I found out about salsa in the '70s when it was actually being made, and Hector Lavoe Miente was like the one track I sort of would play even when I was DJing up in Amherst, and I had a lot of Puerto Rican friends from the Bronx, Apache Ramos, and my boys in college, and I would always play that. And then when I heard that it was his uncle, it was pretty special. What a talent, What a talent.
Yeah.
Yourself, you talked about music mentors. Did you have a business mentor? Because I always thought whoever your business mentor was, I wish they had been my business mentor. Did you have someone who really you listened to? Because obviously you've had this great business career with the publishing company and all the other stuff you've done. So was there someone who sort of gave you the right tips on that one?
A guy named Joel Chase. He was a stockbroker. DJ'd for his daughter's Sweet 16. And I went to his office to pick up cash, not knowing that we would get a check.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and then I was like, well, what do you do here? And he says, oh, we buy
Make
stocks, we
money.
sell stocks. You put your money to work. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, right now you're working for money. But then you take that money and you do it, and then it makes money for you. And I was like mesmerized. I'm like, what? What do you mean? So he, said, yeah, you could buy something. There's all these different companies and they're publicly traded. And he gave me a copy of Barron's magazine. And then every day I would go there just to like talk to him about it. And then
How old? When was this? When was this?
oof, it had to be 77,
This is before you.
78.
God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I learned about the stock market from him. And then I started buying stocks. And every time I made some money, I would go there and bring him a check and he would deposit and he'd buy more stock for me. And I was like, wow, this one's gone up a lot. This one's a little bit down. He goes, yeah, but you're getting a good dividend. So he taught me a lot of stuff about that world. And, I had a bunch
That
of
was
side
early on. That was.
and so it made sense to me. And and then when I started making real money, then I would just give him a lot more, and it just kept growing and growing. And it's like you got to buy a place, and I'm like, well, how do I do that? And then he walked me through the steps. So
And this
so
was
on the
all
business
from.
side,
This
he
is
was
all from.
incredibly helpful. And then also Quincy Jones, she was a lot of help on balancing your life and making records and having a career and putting your money to work and all that. So it all kind of came together from the two of them.
Nice. You were
And
lucky.
obviously you now I'm thinking about it because you were like, trust your instincts,
Yeah. Well.
Don't worry about it. You're going to do the right thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess so. Okay.
Yeah. Well.
And then,
Yeah.
like when I made
All
that
right.
first album, it was crazy because I never did that before.
Yeah. No, but when you went in to do it, you weren't afraid. You thought you could do it, right?
You
Or you did? Were you nervous or no?
Yeah, well, I somehow convinced myself that I could make better records than the ones I was playing. And that was sort of like my aha moment. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do it. It's the worst that could happen.
Yeah.
I'll clear the dance floor. So I've done that before by playing something that they didn't know they were going to like 3 months later.
Right. Right. Okay. Last question: is there a record out there? We asked like your perfect beat, which you MSSB. Is there a perfect beat that you would have liked to been part of making? I mean, it might be that, or is there
Well,
anything
here's the
that Do you remember when you heard something, you go, God, I wish I made that record? Because that's happened to me a bunch of times, you know?
Yeah, I've never really put that much attention because I'm always looking at like what inspired them to do this. Like Funky Drummer, right? That is like in so many records. Every time I
Yeah.
hear it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. It's in this. Over the years, just hearing different genres of dance music evolve into other genres has been really rewarding for me.
Maybe it's more,
I don't think it was a
maybe
song
it's, okay, so-
thought I could make, because most of them was, if it moved me in that way, is because as far as I was concerned, it was perfection. So there was nothing I could have done to make it better.
right. But how
I
about
walked
maybe,
away from so many remixes of songs that I did not believe I could make better. One was Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, Ghostbusters, Caribbean Queen. Like, you want to remix this? I'm like, there's nothing I could do to this. This is a hit record
right.
as it is. I can't change it to make it better. So I
But
don't
did,
know if I can really answer that.
okay, maybe the better question is, do you remember the first time you heard a record that made you go, what the fuck is that? Because, the What the Fuck Is That record are,
Trans Europe Express
being that this is the first podcast,
by Kraftwerk.
yeah.
That song, when I heard it, I was blown away by it. I could not, even 13 minutes long, I would just listen to it over and over. And I'd never heard anything like that before. And no matter where, as a DJ that I played it at the time, all different crowds liked it. So that was incredible. I mean, B-boys like it, gay clubs like it, it was like across the board.
And that's a great way to segue into I liked it too, because Planet Rock.
Yeah.
But Bambaataa would play Trans Europe Express. That was one of his b-boy classics that he would play. I heard it when I was still living in Boston. I was turned on to Kraftwerk by Autobahn. I don't know if you remember, it was sort of on the pop chart. So that was sort of a interesting career move for a band from Germany who had a pop hit, sort of a novelty record, you would have thought, and then they've had this amazing career, as you have. And I'd like to thank you for doing the podcast. This is Arthur Baker. You've been listening to Looking for the Perfect Beat, a podcast that goes along with my new memoirs, Looking for the Perfect Beat on Faber. And thank you for joining us.